Good, come on, good reps. There you go. Come on. So what we're gonna be doing across this series is taking you through some of her workouts, showing you a lot of the mistakes that she was making beforehand, some of the mistakes that you may be making, and so that we can give y'all tips on how to fix that and why we would be fixing that. So today we're actually gonna be kicking it off with back, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was probably the biggest thing we needed to improve.
Definitely, yeah. I spent my last off season doing everything on my own, not really structured. So this, having structure in this off season is everything, both performance, enjoyment of my workouts, and development of especially my back.
And I think one of the big things that's missed when we start talking like optimal or things like that is the intensity nature. Our work sets are to failure. We're using a logbook and tracking performance and beating it every week, but we're doing things in a manner that's going to be the best for the end result for whatever body part we're training. All right guys, so with back training, a lot of the times what we see is there's a very big notion of full range of motion and doing that across all of your patterns, okay? And I think what the missed point is that every exercise has a goal, but that exercise may not take an actual muscle group throughout its entire range of motion within that one pattern. So what we see a lot of times is overreaching on common lat patterns, changing thoracic spine angle in certain overhand row patterns, which is just basically how much we lean forward and tilt back. And we see this start to shift tension elsewhere. So to give you a prime example is a biceps full range of motion is from here all the way to behind the head, right? But when we do a dumbbell curl, we're not curling the dumbbell all the way behind the head. Yet we take that concept and we apply it to back training, which is a very big misnomer. So what we want to do is define what the goal of every exercise is and then keep it within the confines of that goal. All right, so what we're gonna be starting with is a little bit of an activation here. So as you can see, she's starting with a face pull. She's gonna end this with a little bit of an isometric hold at the very end. One of the biggest things missed within back training is that people can't feel it. They don't know what's working. So we're gonna be getting our muscles in a shortened position, so fully contracted, before we train so that everything is firing, central nervous system's upregulated, and we're actually gonna be able to fully use the musculature we're trying to train. So what you're gonna see her doing second is one for lats. So she's gonna get into a very short position. She's gonna do very short reps to keep it in a very contracted lat. You're gonna get increased blood flow, increased central nervous system output, and you're gonna be able to feel your lats probably for the first time in a long time. Now hold it. Good, hold and release. Good, all right. So obviously none of this is work sets, but we're kind of getting into the transition of warming up and getting that back musculature firing, especially for a lot of you guys that struggle with using your arms in back training. It's a good way to start before we get into warm-ups and then work sets for the first movement. All right guys, so we're gonna start with a few warm-ups here. All of these warm-ups are sub-maximal, so first one be about 50% of the workload, 75% and then 90%. Reps coming down as we go to the last ones, like maybe one or two, before we really get into our work sets. Now, an overhand row is a lot of times mislabeled as a lat pattern, okay? Primary action for this is gonna be trap and rhomboids because they bring those scapulas together. However, the reason we use a Smith machine is because we can do some things with a Smith that we can't do with a barbell in order to get lat action into it some. An overhand position is not a great position for a lat, but with a Smith, the bar never moves. So we can pull our hands down towards us when we go to unrack it, and the entire time throughout the range to keep our lats activated so that we get some of those lat fibers across the mid-back when we're doing this, okay? So primary goal for this is gonna be trap rhomboid area, but we're gonna see lats involved by using that cue of doing a pullover the entire time we're doing reps here. So what you'll see is when I unrack it, I actually come all the way up to the top, kind of set it and pull my arms towards me before I lean into the row. Good.
I think one thing with this that I've noticed is like as you pull back against your thighs, you kind of will come forward over the bar, and that's okay because that's what's going to happen as you pull back, but that's differentiated from standing up with the bar. So I see a lot of people do that where they're rowing and they'll stand up with it. So you want to make sure that you're not using momentum to pull the bar up.
It's a bend over row, not an RDL. All right, so as we kind of jump into these work sets, you'll see that her form from first rep to last rep is not going to change. So we're not trying to do an RDL in order to get that last rep. Torso position will stay very similar. She'll row it to that same spot on her torso that she was talking about earlier, how she pulls herself forward, which is a product of the goal of the exercise. So if you want to take lat out of it completely, you would just row it higher on your torso. So pulling it to your chest rather than letting yourself pull forward and pull it to your lower stomach. So big thing here is rep standardization. So the first rep should look like the last one, and this is something that Olivia does very well. Come on. Good shit. That beat the logbook from last time? Yeah, so the goal is to progress in some form or fashion every session, right? Whether that be load or a rep. Micro load progressions, so like 2.5 pounds and 5 pound increments, are an easier progression than adding a rep on a set. Total volume's less. Doing an extra rep with 225 is 225 pounds of work. Doing the same reps with 10 pounds on the bar is only 10. So places you're taking performance progressions really well, we can go for rep progressions until we get out of the rep range. Places where you're struggling to progress, micro loads is probably the best way to go. Just depending on where you are in the year. Right now I'm in micro load session right before prep. Feeling pretty crappy, but getting there. So. Good rep. There you go. Come on. Come on. Good. One more. There it is. Said you wonder why Papa Smurf is so big. Olivia's channeling that Papa and Mrs. Smurf energy today.
That's all I need is a nickname like Papa Smurf. Shit like that. I'm like, I want a cool nickname in the industry.
Papa Smurf.
Papa Smurf.
That's it. Quality, come on. Come on. Come on. Good. Same rep. Good. Good. Come on. Come on. One of the biggest things you see here is an overreaching. Go ahead and start. So as you can see, she's stopping. Go. Good. She's stopping before she starts rolling that shoulder over. So one of the biggest things you see with lats is, good, that stop position is perfect. One of the biggest things you see with lats is people wanting to rotate to an overhand position. What that does is it changes the plane of your humerus or your upper arm, where the tension actually shifts to your rear delt and your teres. So in order to connect with the lat again, you've got to rotate down before you even start the lat action. So this is a prime example of one of those movements that we want to stay within the goal of the exercise for the range of motion and not necessarily take it through the full capacity of range of motion for that movement. Because we're trying to keep it in the lats, which is probably the biggest thing you needed when it came to this off season. And we often see it translate to upper back and arm movement. So torso angle stays the same. We're not rotating as we pull, and we're not overreaching as we go. So you'll get to see kind of what that looks like when we get to our work sets too. So one of the things you see that's different a lot of times is how people stand or put their stance on this, okay? You'll notice Olivia's got her knee up on the bench. I do what's called a staggered stance, which is technically a more functional bracing pattern. I have some bracing issues that keeping me in a functional position is a little bit better. And then the other one you see is a square hip. So you saw Olivia's. Mine is gonna look like this, an open staggered stance. And then the other one you typically see is a closed off square hip. So straight on. For me, from an output perspective, since bracing is an issue still, I go with the more functional stance because I can still keep my hip closed and not rotate it open as a pull, but I can keep my brace where it doesn't mess with my output. So it's all context dependent. I'm wider, so I can stagger the bench where she's a little bit shorter, so she needs a knee on the bench. Just depends on like how you're built. So 5'8" and up, probably you can stagger. 5'7" and lower, probably want a knee on the bench. All right, so you might notice we don't have the same number of plates on all the pegs, okay? So a lat is strongest in a stretch position, okay? And progressively gets weaker as you pull. The only reason is because the distance from the shoulder joint, because of your humerus, is getting further. As you pull, the weight's pulling down, you're opposing that force, okay? Essentially all you need to know from that is it's your strongest here, weakest here. So we're addressing that with the way that we load the pegs. So we're not loading really anything on the bottom right now because we know we're very weak here, especially for Olivia, who until this last training block hadn't really fully shortened a lat, no offense. And then mid-range we can load because that is typically where we're pretty strong. And then we're the strongest here, so we're putting the most load here. Just for a go-to how-to rule of thumb, 2/3 of the weight here, the other third of the weight here, and none on the bottom until you run out of peg room on these. Good. So she does a great job of keeping her hips closed and not opening as she rows. Good, right here. Good. Good. Good, a little further, right there. Good. Great reps, come on, get one, I'm with you, come on. Go. Come on, one more, come on, same rep, don't change it, I'm here. Change the same rep. That's it. There you go. Perfect pull there, Olivia, that was the spot. Good. Good, very good. Good, come on. Come on. Good, keep it here. Yes. I'm with you, come on. One, take it, same rep, take it. Come on. Good.
So, I always flip back and forth. You can do this different ways, but between like the last day and the day I'm doing now. I do this movement on 2 different days of the week, but I always compare it to the same day. So I would never go back and compare to, say, my A day, even though it's the same movement, because I have different movements before and after it. So if you have the same movement a couple times a week on different workouts, make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
One of the big things here to talk about is like arm path. Lat involvement is completely for the humerus or your upper arm. So we're worried with where this goes, okay? Glenohumeral joint, shoulder joint, and your humerus or your upper arm. So with a lat, what we want to happen is we want that shoulder to move down before we move back. And the way that we do that is by driving that elbow to our quad and then rowing as like the thought process before we actually finish the row. So obviously this is a handle on a machine. One of the reasons we like this is this arc goes this way before it goes up. So you hold the bottom of the handle, you lock your lat in, and you don't even really have to think about it. That being said, if you're doing a dumbbell row, it's obviously freestanding. That is something you have to think about elbow path. So what we're not doing is we're not jerking it from the bottom where that elbow starts to flare. We're not using momentum from the bottom, which is the biggest thing we see, especially with that overreaching. And so we're locked in. The elbow path stays in the same plane, really tucked by the elbow or by the torso. And we're driving the elbow to the quad before we row. All right, this is gonna be heavy as fuck. Ooh, that got me. Anybody know how many that was? 11-ish? Okay, that's what I counted. I'm just a terrible counter. We said that we're gonna buy a clicker for our group so that whoever's not training, they click the reps. One of the things that's important here is it's a lot of output per one arm. So taking a little bit of a break before you do the other so that it doesn't mess with the performance on the other arm. Obviously starting with what's probably your weaker side, but 30 seconds to a minute, catch your gatherings, catch your thoughts, then get back at it. Another thing you'll see too is she stays on top of it. She doesn't like start to lean back as she rows. She's keeping the tension in the plane of the lat and not leaning back to let her traps and stuff start to get into play or use momentum. So once you set her over the top of it, the torso doesn't move. Come on. Come on, Olivia. Good reps. I'm with you. You do the same rep. Come on. Still you. Still you. Still you. Come on. Still you. Come on. Negative here. Negative here. Stay on it. Come on, I'm with you. Come on. Still you. Still you. Still you. Come on. Yes, negative. Yes, negative. Good shit.
also have lat push-up work on one of my leg days, because lats is something that I've always struggled to develop, and it's really important in figure, especially in the classes above figure, to develop that, because that is part of the V taper. I always had like a misconception that pull downs were for lats and rows were for traps, like width versus thickness. And I think one thing Luke has taught me through this program is it's all about like arm position, and when you learn to connect with the lats, you can tailor different movements to target the lats better. This has been my absolute favorite movement. I have trouble connecting with lats on like a normal pronated pull down, and this is something I feel really well, especially like with a unilateral movement like this. I can really focus on that side, and my lats have grown a lot from this. And not only that, but this movement particularly has allowed me to build that mind-muscle connection that then transfers over to other exercises. So if something isn't working for you, sometimes just like hammering away at it because you saw someone else do it, or someone says it's the best thing, that's not necessarily the answer. You need to figure out what works well for your anatomy, and you know, and what you actually feel. And sometimes it takes an external eye to visualize, you know, where you can correct form or where a movement may not be optimal for you.
I think that definitely needs to be resaid, right? Because we get this tendency of like, dumbbells are best, barbells are best, everyone has to squat. Like, they're great output movements, they're great compounds, but we can find ways to cater compounds to the individual, right? Lats is something she really struggles with. So by putting her on a machine where she doesn't have to worry about stabilizing a lot of stuff, she's able to connect a lot better, right? She detached herself from the emotion of, I've got a dumbbell row, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Not to say that dumbbell rows aren't great for some people, they are, but it's not for everyone, right? And like she said, if you don't fully know whether that's the case, an external eye is always the best way to go. Even I have somebody that looks over my stuff. Like, detaching yourself from your process as much as you can is probably the best way. But if you're making decisions for yourself, use video, use analysis, compare if things growing, your physique progressing the way you want it to. If not, it's time to go to the drawing board. All this talk about what trains what is great, but we do have to understand how that translates to physique, right? So for her, the lats are specifically something that's going to be especially taper from the front. So making that illusion of the waist looking small. It's that frame away from the rib cage that's going to set your shoulders up to look wider. And then from the back, it's going to, the more lat development you have, the more the illusion of lat going down into the hip, so your lats and your back staying wider for longer, it's going to do. And then as we kind of go into things for mid traps, rhomboids or delts, that's kind of setting the framework for that big start point across the top, so that we have the widest start point and it stays wide as we go down into the lats, right? So you can see those lats are creating the taper into the waist, right? Even more so if she had a posing suit on. It's giving that illusion of the shoulders being even bigger than they were. Granted, we've added a lot of shoulder size too, but then from the back, this is the biggest difference. Not only is the start point out here wider than what it used to be, but those lats are coming down further before they start to go into the hip, right? So we're giving that illusion with lat development that you're a lot wider than what you may actually be. And this can be posing too. It's where it's paying attention to this stuff's very important when it comes to translating to a physique. I think your pictures say that, huh?
Definitely.
Yeah. How much you were struggling with this pattern? So kind of describe what you were going through, and then we'll...
So I injured something in this area that has always just felt really funky, like in my lats when I do like a pronated movement. But with any like program, standard program, you'll find pronated pull downs are always in it, and it's something I've always struggled with because I feel like it catches and I have to like just maneuver around, and I don't really feel my lats well. So we switched from a pronated pull down, which was overhand, to a semi-pronated, which allows me to rotate a little bit, and that puts my shoulder in a much better position that I can actually activate my lats better, and it's much more comfortable. I feel it better. So again, that goes back to not sticking with something and drilling away at something that isn't working.
And we know from like her history, she has a past shoulder injury, right? So automatically out of the gate as a coach, the first thing I'm thinking is that overhead or central nervous system is going to downregulate more than the average individual. All that means is fancy talk is you can't exert much force here as when this arm's down by the side. That's stereotypical for most people. You can test it by gripping a towel by your side here, bringing it overhead and gripping it again, and you'll feel like you're weaker. The only difference is for her, that discrepancy is bigger. So if we put her in an overhead position and we have this large discrepancy of how much force she can do here, we need to fix that because that pattern's not fitting for her and she's not getting the most out of it, right? So we switched to semi-pronated. It's working really well. It's connecting. So kind of the why of the switch there. Start it here, finish it here. There you go. Good. Good. Start it, finish it. Good. Good. Come on. Good. 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 Come on. I'm with you. Same rep, no matter what. Same rep, no matter what. Come on. You got one. Take it. Take it. All right. So, just for y'all visually, this pattern is going to be a little bit more cherries, a little bit more mid-trap into that rhomboid here. The more pronated you go, the more it's going to be here and here. Going to semi-supination brings it into the lats a little, but primary will still be up in the cherries and mid-back.
You good, Olivia?
I think something important to note is like this torso is at the same angle the entire movement. Like you'll see people do pull downs and they're just like, they'll jerk their whole bodies back and forth. And it's like, you're moving more weight, but with what? You know, so, and without control. So you really need to think of, this goes back to like, what is the function and what muscles are we trying to target here? And just keep it controlled, even if you have to drop the weight, because you're more focused on what you're trying to train.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing to note on that is, we're being honest here, this handle is probably a hair narrow for me. So for like some of the bigger guys that are here, your heavyweights, the super heavyweights, a little wider handle will probably be a little bit better for what we're trying to get here. Olivia gets away with it, but for me, like, you can see that hand start to travel inside the elbow as a pull. It's a little narrow. Still gets the job done though. So, you know, it's a good time to be picky sometimes, but to still getting the job done, you got to decide what the trade-off is. Great reps there. All right, so this pattern is something that is the epitome of what people make suboptimal, okay? So a lot of times when you see people do a single arm underhand pull down, as they start to reach, the torso starts to lean forward as they reach forward. You see that hand rotate into overhand position, okay? So when we rotate into that overhand position, we're back to that conversation of the upper arm is changing planes. So we're shifting tension elsewhere. So when we set this up, set the torso, lean to the side that we're working with, keep that arm supinated to semi-supinated the entire time, drive the elbow to the quad, okay? Tension in the lats, trying to get it short, so make sure that you do that, okay? Don't shift the tension elsewhere.
And at the bottom, make sure you're not rotating your shoulder forward. I feel like people try to come down too far, and they try to like pull it almost with their biceps at the bottom, and like rotate their shoulder forward. So you'll want to stop short of that. Yeah, that torso hunch. You see that torso hunch as they pull, right? All you're doing is you're using your abs to help pull the weight down. You're actually lengthening your lat by doing that because the lat has an insertion on the hip, right? So if we're going to tilt forward, we're going to lengthen the lat. Not what we want.
Twice a day? Yeah. Don't let him lie, man, bro. Don't let him lie. You believe in me?
Yeah, come on. Come on. 80,000. Good. Come on. Come on. You got it, take it. Spotting pet peeve 101. Just enough to keep them moving at the same pace the reps were. Don't take the load off of them. So you just want to bump them. We're not yanking it with them. If they can't complete the rep at the same pace, they're done. Take it, take it. Yes, money. There, up.
Oh, I gotta do one more back off.
Stay on it, come on, stay on it.
Nah.
Like on this cool down, the weights go up in increments of 10 pounds. Especially for like a one arm movement, the difference between 40 pounds and 50 pounds, it's a huge jump. So unless you have like the little plates you can stack on top, it's better to progress going above the rep range sometimes within a weight that you can handle before you increase the weight by such a huge jump. So for instance, my rep range here is 12 to 15. When I tried to do 50 pounds, I could only get 10. But then when I dropped down to 40 pounds, I got like 20 reps. So unless you have like something that you can stick on top to create an increment in between, it's better to stick in that higher rep range with control before you increase the weight to fit in the rep range again.
I think on top of that too, one thing you did is just because you were outside of the rep range, you didn't stop, right?
Right.
Right, proximity to failure is probably the most important aspect of gathering a stimulus out of a set. Rep ranges are suggestions. It's not an end-all be-all. So like she said, it's okay to progress a pattern past the rep range if it means that when you make the next low jump, it puts you right at or right below it, right? So no matter what, she's still taking it all. It's not pink dumbbell shit where we're just stopping short, right? We're taking it to the limit. We're doing things accurately, but with intensity as well. This is an incline cable pullover. Probably wondering, why don't you just do a rope cable pullover? Well, it's pretty late in the session. Everything's pretty fatigued, especially lats. It's a very lat-based session. So the benefit to doing an incline cable pullover, if it's set up right, is that as you pull, the load starts to taper. So it gets easier as you pull. And it's directly in the plane of humeral depression, so just basically moving this shoulder joint down as we pull. That's all that means. And as we pull where we get weaker, the load drops off. So you're just looking for where this cable is relative to our arm, which I'll point out when we do reps. So as you can see that cable is at the top, almost an exactly right angle to your upper arm. So you see it's right here, right angle to this. So it's the heaviest there. And it tapers off as that angle gets smaller. Good, come on. Good, come on. Yes, good reps here. Good. Good. Good, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Good, good. You, negative here. There it is. Yep, man.
Probably best to talk about that. Rear dumbbell delt flies. This is something that I really struggled with because I've always thought of myself as someone who's super trap dominant. So when I would feel these, I felt like my scapula coming together, which is your traps. I never really feel it in my rear delts. First mistake, trying to throw around too much weight. I think that was huge. So just like slowing down the movement, opening up shoulder blades. It's okay if traps are involved some, like they're gonna be involved.
Yeah.
And that was something, a misconception I had that, oh well, if my traps are working at all, then I'm doing the movement incorrectly. So we kind of stripped this down, dropped the weight, just really like focused on form, kept grip neutral, which also really helped, and it's starting to feel a lot better.
Yeah, and sometimes when you struggle with a pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to throw away, you just gotta go to the drawing board with it, right? As soon as we worked on this in person, it clicked, right? Hand position was in the wrong, it was rotated too far over. We were getting a little bit momentum, arms were a little bit too bent for her, traps were taking over. So essentially, just some tips. Think about touching the walls as you're doing it. The more bent arm you go, the more you're gonna bring your mid trap into it. For me right now, that's probably more the variation I'm gonna do. Where for her, it's gonna be a little bit more of a straighter arm variation because we want rear delt to be mainly involved, less scapular motion. But I'm okay with some mid trap because it's one of the things I need the most in my back. So just gonna be how the same pattern can cater to a different individual with different execution is all. All right guys, so that's a wrap. Went through all the movements with you, gave you some cues to take home, use on patterns for yourself. Try to use similar cues on patterns that emulate the ones that we did, even if it's not the same exact one. Remember, each exercise has a goal. If the exercise matches the goal of the one we did today, the cues are probably gonna be very similar. So put it in the comments, let us know how much you like this information. If it gives you some help, make sure to like and subscribe and let us know if you want some more of this type of content.
I didn't have anything in my brain prepared.
You were like,